Sebastian Ashford had always believed disasters announced themselves with thunder. He expected storms to gather above castle towers. He expected enemies to arrive carrying swords. He expected ruin to wear a face he could recognize. Instead, it arrived folded inside a single envelope. The letter waited upon his desk when he entered the study that autumn morning. Beyond the tall windows of Ashford Castle, pale sunlight stretched across rolling green hills and silver rivers that had belonged to his family for centuries. The kingdom regarded Duke Sebastian Ashford as one of its most fortunate men. At 34 he possessed wealth, influence, and a title older than many royal houses. Yet as he broke the wax seal bearing his late father's crest, an unease settled over him. Across the room stood Theodore Harrington, the family's elderly solicitor. His expression was unusually grave. "Is something wrong?" Sebastian asked. The old lawyer clasped his hands tightly before him. "There is a matter concerning your father's will, your grace." Sebastian's stomach tightened. "My father's estate was settled 3 years ago. So we believed." The lawyer slowly removed a leather-bound document from his briefcase. The original will was recently discovered among Lord Ashford's private papers. Silence settled over the room. Sebastian stared at him. "Original?" Harrington nodded. "There is an additional clause." A chill moved through the study despite the warmth of the fire. The lawyer unfolded several pages and adjusted his spectacles. "According to the terms established by your grandfather and reaffirmed by your father, the Duke of Ashford must be legally married before taking permanent possession of the family inheritance." Sebastian frowned. "I inherited everything years ago. Temporarily." The word struck like a hammer. Harrington swallowed. "The clause remained dormant because the original document was misplaced. Its rediscovery activates the condition immediately." For several seconds Sebastian could not speak. Outside, a flock of birds crossed the bright sky. Inside, his entire world shifted. "What exactly are you saying?" The old lawyer lowered his eyes. "If you are not legally married before midnight tonight, every Ashford asset must transfer to the secondary heir named within the will." A dreadful certainty already formed inside Sebastian's mind. "Edmund." "Yes, your grace." The room suddenly felt smaller. Lord Edmund Blackthorne. His cousin. His rival. The one man in the kingdom he trusted least. Sebastian walked toward the window. The castle stood magnificent beneath the morning sun. Ancient towers. Endless fields. Generations of history. Everything his family had built. Everything he had spent years protecting. And by midnight, none of it would belong to him. Surely there must be a legal challenge. Harrington shook his head. "The wording is flawless." "An appeal?" "No." "A delay?" "No." Each answer sounded like another nail being driven into a coffin. Sebastian turned sharply. "Then find another solution." "There isn't one." The lawyer's voice softened. "There is only marriage." The words echoed through the room. "Marriage. Not next month. Not next week. Before midnight. Less than 14 hours away." For the first time in years, genuine panic touched Sebastian Ashford. Within an hour the entire castle knew. Servants whispered in corridors. Messengers raced from the stables. Carriages departed in every direction carrying urgent invitations. By noon Sebastian had proposed to 3 women. All refused. One believed the Ashford fortune was secretly bankrupt. Another suspected a hidden illness. The third laughed openly and suggested only a desperate man offered marriage after a single conversation. By afternoon, the rumors had spread through aristocratic society. The Duke is ruined. The Duke is cursed. The Duke is hiding something. Every rejection made the next one easier. Women who once sought his attention suddenly found reasons to avoid him. Doors closed. Excuses multiplied. Polite smiles replaced genuine interest. As sunset approached, Sebastian returned to Ashford Castle with failure hanging around his shoulders like a chain. The great halls felt unusually hollow. Every ticking clock seemed louder. Every passing minute felt stolen. He wandered through the castle without direction. The library. The gallery. The music room. Places that had always felt permanent now seemed strangely fragile. Eventually, his footsteps carried him toward the kitchens. Warm light spilled from the open doorway. The scent of fresh bread drifted through the corridor. Inside, dozens of servants worked among copper pots and long wooden tables. Sebastian might have continued walking had he not noticed one figure standing quietly near the center of the room. Rosalie Whitmore, the kitchen maid. Her simple cream dress stretched around the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy. Flour dusted her sleeves and hands. Loose strands of chestnut hair had escaped her bonnet. She worked carefully despite her condition, kneading dough with patient determination while ignoring the occasional glances directed her way. Everyone in the castle knew her story. Abandoned, unmarried, expecting a child. A scandal wrapped in kindness. Yet Sebastian had never once heard her complain. As he watched, an older servant accidentally dropped a tray of ingredients. Several workers groaned in frustration. Rosalie immediately crossed the room and helped gather everything from the floor. She smiled when the woman apologized. She always smiled, even when others did not. Sebastian found himself lingering in the doorway. Something about her quiet dignity unsettled him. Most people sought advantage. Most people calculated value. Most people measured worth through status. Rosalie possessed none of those protections. Yet she carried herself with more grace than half the nobility he had met that day. One of the cooks approached him. "Poor girl," the woman whispered. Mr. Nathaniel Graves left her the moment he learned about the baby. Sebastian's gaze returned to Rosalie. She had been betrayed, humiliated, discarded. Still she continued forward. The realization struck him with unexpected force. All day he had searched for a woman willing to stand beside him. Perhaps he had been searching in the wrong places. The kitchen noise gradually faded from his awareness. The clocks were still ticking. Midnight was still coming. The inheritance was still slipping away. Yet for the first time since morning he saw a path that had not existed before. Rosalie looked up from her work and noticed him standing there. Surprise flickered across her face. The room slowly fell silent. Sebastian stepped forward. Flour-covered hands froze above the dough. Every servant watched. Every breath seemed suspended. And then the Duke of Ashford stopped beside the pregnant maid, met her startled eyes and quietly asked, "Will you marry me before midnight?" The question hung in the warm kitchen air long after Sebastian Ashford spoke it. No one moved. No one breathed. Rosalie Whitmore simply stared at him. Flour dust clung to her hands. Candlelight shimmered across her wide eyes. For a moment she genuinely wondered if exhaustion had finally overcome her senses. "Your Grace," she whispered. Sebastian's expression remained steady. "I asked if you would marry me." A nervous laugh escaped her lips. Several servants exchanged bewildered glances. Rosalie shook her head. "Please do not make sport of me." Pain flickered across Sebastian's face. "I'm not joking." The room fell silent once more. Rosalie looked around at the watching servants, then back at the Duke standing before her in his dark coat and polished boots. Nothing about the moment made sense. Dukes did not marry kitchen maids. They certainly did not marry abandoned pregnant women. Yet the seriousness in Sebastian's eyes frightened her more than any joke could have. "Why?" she asked softly. The question struck directly at the heart of his desperation. Sebastian glanced briefly toward the windows where twilight deepened across the castle grounds. "Because if I am not married before midnight, I lose everything." Rosalie absorbed the words. Everything. The title. The estates. The castle. The future. She had heard whispers throughout the day. Everyone in Ashford Castle had. Still, hearing the truth from his own mouth felt different. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His answer came without hesitation. The certainty unsettled her. Rosalie lowered her eyes. She had spent months being judged. Judged by strangers. Judged by servants. Judged by noble guests. Ever since Nathaniel Graves abandoned her, people seemed unable to see anything beyond her pregnancy. Some looked at her with pity. Others with contempt. Yet Sebastian was offering her a title that society spent entire lifetimes chasing. It felt impossible. "Why not a lady from court?" she asked. "I asked them. And? They all refused." A faint smile touched Rosalie's lips despite herself. The Duke almost smiled back. For the first time that day, the crushing pressure around his chest eased slightly. Rosalie studied him carefully. Behind the confidence of a powerful nobleman, she saw exhaustion. Behind the authority, she saw fear. The realization surprised her. Sebastian Ashford was not standing before her as a duke. He was standing before her as a man running out of time. "What would happen if I agreed?" she asked. "You would become Duchess of Ashford." The word sounded absurd. Rosalie looked down at her flower-covered dress. A duchess. The idea felt almost laughable. Yet another thought quickly followed. Her child. A child born without protection. Without security. Without a name respected by society. For months she had feared the future. Now the future stood directly in front of her. Not perfect. Not romantic. Not even sensible. But real. The kitchen clocks continued ticking. Each second carried Sebastian closer to ruin. Finally Rosalie lifted her gaze. "If this is truly what you want, then yes." The room erupted. Gasps echoed from every corner. One servant dropped a spoon. Another nearly fainted. Sebastian released a breath he had not realized he was holding. The impossible had happened. Before midnight he would have a wife. Word spread through Ashford Castle with astonishing speed. By the time preparations began, half the county seemed aware of the engagement. Lord Edmund Blackthorne arrived shortly before the ceremony. His laughter echoed through the great hall. "A pregnant maid?" he said loudly. "Surely desperation has robbed you of your senses." Sebastian ignored him. Edmund's amusement only deepened. "You may save the inheritance, cousin, but society will never forgive this." Perhaps he was right. Sebastian knew exactly how the aristocracy would react. The daughter of servants could never become one of them. Especially not one carrying another man's child. Yet surprisingly those concerns felt distant now. Midnight remained the true enemy. The chapel stood at the eastern edge of the castle. Hundreds of candles illuminated ancient stone walls. Colored moonlight filtered through stained glass. The atmosphere felt less like a wedding and more like fate holding its breath. Rosalie entered wearing a simple ivory gown borrowed from the castle wardrobes. No jewels adorned her neck. No royal procession accompanied her. Yet something about her quiet dignity transformed the room. Sebastian found himself unable to look away. She walked slowly because of the child she carried. Each careful step reflected courage rather than weakness. When she reached the altar, their eyes met. Neither spoke. The priest began. Sacred vows echoed beneath vaulted ceilings. Outside, the wind howled across the castle grounds. Inside, time itself seemed to accelerate. At 11:59, Rosalie Whitmore became Rosalie Ashford. At midnight the bells rang. The inheritance was saved. A strange silence settled over Sebastian. For the first time all day, disaster no longer stood at his door. The next morning reality arrived. Rosalie awoke as Duchess of Ashford. The title changed everything. And nothing. Servants bowed. Doors opened. Rooms once forbidden became hers. Yet whispers followed wherever she went. The noble guests lingering at the castle barely concealed their disapproval. Some refused to speak to her. Others spoke only through intermediaries. One aristocratic lady openly referred to her as the kitchen duchess. Rosalie endured every insult with remarkable composure. She never argued. Never retaliated. Never demanded respect. Instead, she continued helping wherever she could. She visited sick servants. Organized food for struggling families in nearby villages. Spent afternoons reading to orphan children. Gradually, the people of Ashford began loving her. The castle staff became fiercely protective. Villagers spoke her name with affection. Sebastian observed all of it. He had expected gratitude. Perhaps cooperation. What he had not expected was admiration. The more he watched Rosalie, the more difficult it became to see her as merely a solution to a legal problem. One evening, while rain battered the castle windows, he found her comforting a frightened servant girl whose mother had fallen ill. Rosalie sat beside the child for hours. Not because anyone asked her. Not because anyone watched. Simply because she cared. That night, Sebastian lay awake longer than usual. For the first time since their wedding, he wondered whether fate had done more than save his inheritance. Weeks passed. Autumn deepened. The distance between husband and wife slowly narrowed. Not through grand declarations. Not through romance. But through countless small moments. Shared conversations. Quiet smiles. Mutual respect. Neither dared name what was growing between them. Then the storm arrived. Rain lashed against the castle towers. Thunder rolled across the hills. Near midnight, a carriage emerged from the darkness and stopped before Ashford Castle. A lone man stepped out. Water streamed from his coat as he climbed the front steps. When the butler opened the door, the visitor removed his hat. Sebastian froze. Rosalie went pale. Because standing in the doorway was Nathaniel Graves. And the first words he spoke shattered the fragile peace they had begun to build. "I've come for Rosalie," he said. "And for my child." The storm seemed determined to tear Ashford Castle from its foundations. Rain battered the tall windows. Wind howled through ancient stone corridors. Lightning flashed across the night sky, illuminating the grand entrance hall in brief bursts of silver light. Nathaniel Graves stood in the doorway like a ghost returning from a grave. Water dripped from his coat. His dark hair clung to his forehead. Yet his smile carried the same polished arrogance Rosalie remembered all too well. For several heartbeats nobody spoke. Rosalie felt the blood drain from her face. The child within her shifted suddenly as though sensing her distress. Sebastian stepped forward. His posture remained calm, but tension tightened every muscle in his body. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. Nathaniel's gaze never left Rosalie. "I believe I already said." His voice was smooth and confident. "I've come for Rosalie and my child." The words echoed through the hall. Rosalie lowered her eyes. Months earlier, hearing those words might have awakened hope. Now they awakened only pain. Nathaniel had vanished when she needed him most. He had ignored her letters. Ignored her tears. Ignored the child growing inside her. Yet somehow he now stood before her acting as though nothing had happened. Sebastian's expression hardened. "Rosalie is my wife." Nathaniel laughed softly. A temporary arrangement born from desperation. The insult hung heavily between them. Before Sebastian could respond, Rosalie spoke. "You left me." Nathaniel finally looked at her. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. "You misunderstand what happened." "No." Her voice remained quiet. "I understand perfectly." Nathaniel sighed dramatically. Business circumstances required difficult decisions. Rosalie almost smiled at the absurdity. Even now he refused to tell the truth. Even now he hid behind excuses. Sebastian noticed the hurt buried beneath her composure. Something inside him stirred unexpectedly. Protectiveness. The feeling surprised him. Their marriage had begun as necessity. Yet watching Nathaniel reopen old wounds filled him with anger. "Leave," Sebastian said. Nathaniel's smile vanished. "I don't think I will." Thunder rattled the windows. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Finally Sebastian summoned 2 guards. Nathaniel offered no resistance as he was escorted away. Before disappearing down the corridor, he looked directly at Rosalie. "This isn't finished." Those 4 words lingered long after he was gone. The following morning, Sebastian ordered a complete investigation. Every detail of Nathaniel Graves' past would be examined. Every business record. Every financial transaction. Every legal document. If Nathaniel intended to threaten Rosalie, Sebastian intended to understand exactly who he was dealing with. Days passed. The storm disappeared, but unease remained. Nathaniel took rooms at a nearby inn and began spreading rumors throughout the county. According to his version of events, Rosalie had abandoned him. According to his version, Sebastian had stolen another man's family. The stories grew more outrageous with each retelling. Rosalie endured the gossip silently. She had spent too much of her life fighting judgment. Now she simply focused on helping others. One morning Sebastian found her in the servants' quarters tending to a young maid suffering from fever. The following afternoon she organized food deliveries for struggling villagers whose crops had failed. Another evening she spent hours reading stories to orphan children gathered near the castle chapel. She never sought recognition. Never expected reward. She simply helped wherever help was needed. Sebastian watched all of it. At first, curiosity motivated him. Soon admiration replaced curiosity. Rosalie possessed a kindness that felt almost impossible in a world built upon selfish ambition. The more he observed her, the more he questioned his own assumptions. Strength, he realized, did not always wear armor. Sometimes it wore a simple dress dusted with flour. Meanwhile, reports from the investigation began arriving. Each revelation painted Nathaniel in darker colors. The first report uncovered enormous gambling debts. The second revealed failed investments concealed from business partners. The third exposed forged signatures on multiple financial agreements. Sebastian sat in his study late one evening reading the evidence. Disgust grew with every page. Nathaniel was not merely irresponsible. He was dangerous. Yet one question continued troubling him. Why return now? If Nathaniel cared so little months earlier, why suddenly fight for Rosalie? The answer arrived unexpectedly. Several days later, Theodore Harrington entered the study carrying a leather folder. His expression was unusually grim. "I believe we found the reason." Sebastian accepted the documents. Inside were contracts connected to an upcoming marriage agreement. Nathaniel had recently attempted to marry the daughter of a wealthy industrial magnate. The arrangement promised an enormous fortune. The wedding collapsed after rumors regarding Rosalie resurfaced. The magnate withdrew his support. The inheritance disappeared. The opportunity vanished. Nathaniel's financial future crumbled overnight. Understanding struck Sebastian immediately. Nathaniel had not returned because he loved Rosalie. He had returned because he needed something. Money. Influence. Access to Ashford wealth. Rosalie had simply become part of his plan. Rage flared unexpectedly within Sebastian. For a long moment he stared into the fireplace. He imagined Rosalie facing abandonment alone. Imagined her carrying a child while Nathaniel pursued richer prospects. Imagined every humiliation she had endured. The anger surprised him because it felt personal. Far more personal than it should have. That evening he found Rosalie walking through the castle gardens. Autumn leaves drifted through cool air. The setting sun painted the horizon gold. She looked beautiful. Not because of expensive gowns or noble titles. Because she possessed a quiet light that seemed untouched by cruelty. When she noticed him approaching, she smiled. The simple gesture affected him more than it should have. "You seem troubled," she said. Sebastian hesitated. Then he told her everything. The investigation, the lies, the broken engagement, the greed. Rosalie listened without interruption. When he finished, sadness filled her eyes. Not sadness for herself. Sadness for the man Nathaniel had become. "I once thought I knew him," she said softly. "You know him now." She nodded slowly. For several moments neither spoke. The distance between them felt smaller than ever before. Not husband and wife by contract. Not strangers sharing a title. Something closer. Something dangerous. Something neither fully understood. As twilight deepened around them, Sebastian realized he no longer wanted merely to protect Rosalie. He wanted her happiness. The realization frightened him. Because it mattered. And things that mattered could be lost. Weeks later, while reviewing old financial records connected to Nathaniel's fraud, Sebastian discovered a file hidden inside an archive box that should have contained unrelated documents. At first glance, it appeared insignificant. A faded birth record. Several property transfers. A handwritten statement dated nearly 25 years earlier. Yet one name immediately captured his attention. Rosalie Whitmore. His pulse quickened. He read the documents once. Then twice. Then a third time. Outside, evening shadows lengthened across the castle grounds. Inside, Sebastian sat frozen behind his desk. Because the papers revealed something impossible. Something capable of changing Rosalie's entire life. And if the documents were genuine, the woman everyone believed to be a servant had never been a servant at all. Sebastian Ashford spent most of the night reading the documents. The fire in his study burned low. Candles melted into pools of wax. Outside, winter winds whispered against the ancient castle walls. Yet he barely noticed any of it. Every page revealed another piece of a truth hidden for decades. Rosalie Whitmore was not who she believed herself to be. The faded records identified her as Rosalie Fairchild, daughter of Lord Henry Fairchild and Lady Eleanor Fairchild, owners of vast estates once considered among the wealthiest holdings in the kingdom. Sebastian knew the name. Every nobleman did. The Fairchild family had supposedly collapsed after a series of disastrous investments nearly 25 years earlier. Their fortune vanished. Their lands were sold. Their influence disappeared. History had treated the event as an unfortunate financial tragedy. The documents suggested something far darker. Signatures had been forged. Property transfers had been manipulated. Witness statements had disappeared. Money had changed hands under suspicious circumstances. And woven through every page appeared one recurring name. Blackthorne. Sebastian stared at it. Again. And again. Lord Edmund Blackthorne's father had played a central role in the destruction of the Fairchild family. The implications were staggering. If the evidence proved genuine, Rosalie was not merely a forgotten heiress. She was the rightful owner of a fortune stolen before she could even understand her own name. Morning arrived before Sebastian finally left the study. His thoughts remained tangled with disbelief. He found Rosalie in the castle conservatory surrounded by winter roses. Soft sunlight filtered through glass walls. She sat quietly sewing a small blanket for her unborn child. The sight struck him unexpectedly. She looked peaceful, content, entirely unaware that her life was about to change forever. When she noticed him, she smiled warmly. "Have you slept at all?" "Not much." Concern touched her face. "You look exhausted." Sebastian sat beside her. For a moment he struggled to find words. The truth felt almost too large to speak aloud. Finally he handed her the documents. "I think you should read these." Rosalie accepted them cautiously. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Gradually confusion replaced curiosity. Confusion became shock. Shock transformed into complete disbelief. "No." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "This cannot be true." Sebastian remained silent. Rosalie continued reading. Tears slowly gathered in her eyes. "My parents were laborers. They raised you." She looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" Sebastian carefully explained everything. The Fairchild family. The conspiracy. The stolen inheritance. The hidden identity. Each revelation seemed to pull another stone from the foundation of her world. When he finished, silence settled between them. Rosalie stared through the glass ceiling toward the pale sky. Her entire life suddenly felt uncertain. Every childhood memory. Every assumption. Every answer she thought she possessed. Nothing seemed solid anymore. "I don't know who I am." The vulnerability in her voice broke something inside Sebastian. "You are still Rosalie." She looked at him. "The woman who helps everyone, His gaze never wavered. The woman who changed this castle. A tear escaped down her cheek. The woman I admire. For several seconds neither moved. The words lingered between them. Simple. Honest. Dangerously meaningful. Rosalie lowered her eyes before either could say more. Yet something had shifted. Something neither could ignore. News of the discovery spread faster than anyone expected. Within days lawyers arrived. Historians examined records. Investigators reopened forgotten files. Every new piece of evidence strengthened Rosalie's claim. Meanwhile, Lord Edmund Blackthorne received the news with growing horror. His father's legacy stood upon the very foundations now being questioned. If Rosalie's inheritance was restored, enormous portions of the Blackthorne fortune could collapse. For the first time in years, Edmund found himself afraid. Fear quickly transformed into desperation. Desperation became ruthlessness. Soon rumors flooded aristocratic society. According to certain newspapers, Rosalie had manipulated Sebastian from the beginning. According to others, she had fabricated evidence. Some claimed she had deliberately become pregnant to secure sympathy. Others insisted she planned to seize Ashford wealth before abandoning her husband. The lies multiplied daily. At royal banquets, nobles whispered when she entered. Ladies who once merely ignored her now openly questioned her character. Men exchanged skeptical glances behind polished wine glasses. The cruelty became relentless. One afternoon Rosalie attended a charity gathering in the capital. The room fell silent when she arrived. A noblewoman loudly remarked that kitchen maids should remember their place. Several guests laughed. Rosalie stood perfectly still. Humiliation burned across her face. Before she could respond, Sebastian stepped forward. The ballroom watched. Every eye fixed upon the Duke. His reputation had always been precious. His standing among the aristocracy had taken years to build. Defending Rosalie publicly carried consequences. He did it anyway. Any insult directed toward my wife, he said calmly, is an insult directed toward me. The laughter vanished instantly. No one spoke. No one challenged him. For the first time, Rosalie realized he was no longer protecting a convenient arrangement. He was protecting her. The realization stayed with her long after the event ended. As weeks passed, the attacks intensified. Nathaniel joined Edmund's campaign. He gave interviews, sold fabricated stories, invented accusations. Anything that might damage Rosalie's credibility. Yet every attempt revealed more of his own desperation. The kingdom slowly began noticing the pattern. Still, uncertainty remained. Too much money. Too much influence. Too many powerful interests stood against Rosalie. The conflict eventually reached the highest levels of society. Royal advisors became involved. Government officials reviewed evidence. Prominent families demanded answers. The matter could no longer remain private. One snowy evening, a royal messenger arrived at Ashford Castle. His uniform bore the crest of the crown. The castle gathered as the sealed decree was presented. Sebastian broke the wax seal. The room became silent. Rosalie stood beside him. Her hands instinctively rested upon the curve of her pregnancy. The messenger waited. Finally Sebastian unfolded the document and read. His expression changed immediately. "What is it?" Rosalie asked. He looked directly at her. "The king has intervened." A murmur swept through the hall. The messenger stepped forward. By order of King Frederick IV, every major noble family in the kingdom was commanded to attend a royal gathering 3 weeks later. Evidence would be presented. Witnesses would testify. Claims would be judged. The truth would finally be determined before the entire nation. Fear and hope collided inside Rosalie's chest. Everything now pointed toward a single moment. One decision. One verdict. One night capable of changing countless lives. As the messenger departed into the falling snow, Sebastian folded the royal summons slowly. Neither he nor Rosalie noticed Edmund Blackthorne's spy watching from beyond the castle gates, or the secret message already racing toward Edmund's estate. A message carrying only one warning. If Rosalie appeared before the king and won, the Blackthorne family would lose everything they had spent 25 years stealing. Snow covered the capital on the morning of the royal gathering. Carriages rolled through white streets toward the palace, their wheels crunching over frozen stone. Nobles arrived wrapped in velvet cloaks and expensive furs. Whispers traveled faster than the winter wind. Everyone had come to witness the scandal. Everyone had come to judge Rosalie Ashford. The royal ballroom blazed with golden light. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead like captured stars. Musicians played softly from an elevated gallery while hundreds of aristocrats filled the vast chamber. At the far end stood King Frederick IV upon a raised platform. His expression revealed nothing. Rosalie entered beside Sebastian. A hush immediately swept across the room. Months earlier she had walked through noble gatherings as an object of ridicule. Today she walked through them as the woman whose existence threatened some of the most powerful families in the kingdom. Her pregnancy was now impossible to conceal. One hand rested gently upon the curve of her stomach. The other remained linked with Sebastian's arm. She felt frightened. Not for herself. For the future. For the child she carried. For the people who had risked everything to stand beside her. Sebastian sensed her tension. Without speaking, he covered her hand with his own. The simple gesture steadied her. Across the ballroom stood Lord Edmund Blackthorne. Confidence filled his smile. Nathaniel Graves stood beside him. Both men appeared certain of victory. Rosalie wondered how many lies they had prepared. The answer came soon enough. After formal introductions concluded, the king signaled for proceedings to begin. Edmund stepped forward first. His voice carried easily through the silent ballroom. He spoke of forged claims, invented conspiracies, questionable documents. He described Rosalie as an opportunist who had manipulated a desperate duke. Every accusation was delivered with calculated precision. Nathaniel followed. His performance was even more dramatic. He painted himself as a betrayed gentleman, a grieving father, a victim robbed of both love and child. Several nobles nodded as he spoke. Others exchanged uncertain glances. Rosalie listened quietly. Each lie felt familiar now. The attacks no longer surprised her. Yet hearing them repeated before the entire kingdom still hurt. When Nathaniel finally finished, he looked directly at her. Everything she possesses belongs to deception. A murmur spread through the crowd. The king remained motionless. Then his gaze shifted toward Sebastian. Your response, Duke Ashford? The ballroom grew silent. Sebastian stepped forward. The calm confidence in his posture immediately commanded attention. For a moment he simply looked at the gathered nobles. Then he spoke. You have heard accusations. His voice was steady. Now you will hear facts. The first witness entered. A former accountant employed by Nathaniel Graves. Under oath, he revealed years of hidden financial fraud. The second witness followed. Then a third. Documents appeared. Contracts emerged. Signatures were examined. One piece of evidence after another dismantled Nathaniel's carefully constructed lies. The confidence slowly disappeared from Nathaniel's face. Sweat gathered along his forehead. His answers became defensive. Contradictions multiplied. Then came the final revelation. The failed marriage agreement. The fortune he had hoped to secure through another woman. The reason he returned for Rosalie. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. The truth stood exposed before everyone. Nathaniel had never returned for love. He had returned for money. The illusion shattered completely. Humiliation spread across his face. But Sebastian was not finished. The greater battle remained. Edmund Blackthorne. The atmosphere shifted as decades-old records were brought forward. Lawyers testified. Historians confirmed signatures. Government investigators presented findings. The conspiracy unfolded piece by piece. Property theft. Forgery. Fraud. Manipulated inheritance transfers. Everything traced back to Edmund's father. Everything connected to the destruction of the Fairchild family. The evidence became overwhelming. Edmund's composure cracked. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. You cannot blame a son for his father's actions, he protested. No, Sebastian replied. But you can blame a son for protecting those actions after discovering the truth. Silence followed. The words struck their target perfectly. Because Edmund had known. Recent correspondence proved it. Financial records proved it. His continued efforts to suppress Rosalie's inheritance proved it. The final defense collapsed. The ballroom erupted into shocked conversation. Some nobles looked horrified. Others looked embarrassed. Many simply stared. For years, the Blackthorne family had enjoyed power built upon stolen foundations. Now those foundations crumbled. King Frederick IV finally rose. Instant silence returned. Every eye focused upon the throne. The king surveyed the room slowly. Then he spoke. The evidence is clear. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Rosalie Fairchild Ashford is the lawful heir of the Fairchild estate. Tears immediately filled Rosalie's eyes. The king continued. Her inheritance shall be restored in full. Another wave of astonishment swept through the ballroom. All titles, lands, and holdings wrongfully taken from her family shall be returned according to law. The verdict was final. The battle was over. Justice had prevailed. Nathaniel lowered his head in defeat. Edmund stood motionless, staring at the floor. Everything they had fought to preserve had vanished. Yet Rosalie barely noticed them. Because she was looking at Sebastian. The man who had stood beside her when every reason existed to walk away. The man who had defended her when society mocked her. The man who had changed without realizing it. The king eventually signaled for the proceedings to conclude. Conversations immediately exploded throughout the ballroom. Everyone expected the story to end there. The lost heiress had reclaimed her birthright. The villains had fallen. The scandal was finished. But another question lingered. Now that Rosalie possessed wealth, status, and independence, what would happen to her marriage? The entire kingdom knew how it had begun. A desperate agreement before midnight. A legal necessity. Nothing more. She no longer needed protection. Sebastian no longer needed a wife to save his inheritance. The arrangement had served its purpose. Many assumed they would quietly separate. Rosalie herself did not know what would happen next. Then Sebastian stepped into the center of the ballroom. The movement immediately attracted attention. Conversations faded. Music stopped. The room gradually became silent again. Rosalie watched him with confusion. He looked nervous, genuinely nervous, something she had never seen before. Slowly he crossed the marble floor until he stood before her. Hundreds of nobles watched. The king watched. The entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Duke Sebastian Ashford lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps echoed beneath the chandeliers. Rosalie's eyes widened. Emotion filled Sebastian's face. Not duty. Not obligation. Love. Pure and undeniable. I married you to save my fortune, he said. The words carried through the silent room. And I believed it was merely a contract. Tears shimmered in Rosalie's eyes. Sebastian continued. But every good thing that followed came from you. His voice thickened. You changed my home. You changed my people. You changed me. Complete silence surrounded them. I spent my life protecting an inheritance. His gaze moved briefly toward the crowd. Then I discovered something worth infinitely more. Rosalie covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Sebastian looked at the child she carried. Then back at her. I do not care whose blood runs through this child's veins. His voice never wavered. I will love this child as my own. A sob escaped somewhere in the crowd. I will protect both of you for the rest of my life. The ballroom had become utterly still. Rosalie, he whispered, not because I need a wife before midnight. His eyes shone with emotion. But because I cannot imagine another day without you. For a moment she could not speak. The woman who had once been abandoned, mocked, discarded, forgotten, now stood before a man willing to choose her before an entire kingdom. Not despite her past. Because of who she was. Through tears Rosalie smiled. Then she nodded. The ballroom erupted. Applause thundered beneath crystal chandeliers. Even the king smiled. Months later, a healthy baby boy was born at Ashford Castle. Sebastian legally named the child his heir. The former kitchen maid became the most beloved duchess in the kingdom. And every time someone asked Duke Sebastian Ashford how he had saved his inheritance before midnight, he simply smiled and looked toward his wife. Because he had set out to save a fortune. Instead he found a family worth more than any kingdom.